On the afternoon of October 26, 1881, in the dusty frontier town of Tombstone, Arizona, a gunfight erupted that would become one of the most legendary events of the American West. The confrontation, remembered as the gunfight at the Corral, lasted less than a minute, but its legend has lasted for generations. Tombstone was still a young town, founded only 4 years earlier after a prospector named Ed Schieffelin discovered silver in the surrounding hills. What started as a mining camp had quickly exploded into a booming and dangerous place filled with gamblers, saloons, brothels, and outlaws. People from every corner of the country came looking for fortune or a fresh start. Among them were the Earp brothers, Virgil, Wyatt, and Morgan. They had experience in law enforcement and came to Tombstone looking for opportunity, hoping to strike it rich and maybe bring some order to the chaos. Virgil took a position as acting city marshal, Morgan served as a special policeman, and Wyatt was appointed deputy U.S. Marshal. Alongside them was their friend Doc Holliday, a well-educated dentist from Georgia who had abandoned his practice and taken up gambling, drinking, and gunfighting. The story of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday had begun years earlier in Fort Griffin, Texas. In 1878, Wyatt was tracking down a train robber named Dirty Dave Rudabaugh. He arrived in Fort Griffin, a rough settlement filled with outlaws and saloons. There he met Doc Holliday, a pale, sharp-tongued gambler known for his deadly skill with a pistol. According to stories, Wyatt walked into a saloon and quickly found himself surrounded by men who meant him harm. At that moment, Doc stepped forward, calmly drew his pistol, and stood beside Wyatt without saying a word. The reputation of Doc Holliday carried weight, and the men backed down. Wyatt always credited Doc with saving his life. From then on, they were loyal friends, standing by each other through thick and thin. They reunited in Dodge City, where Wyatt worked as a lawman and Doc continued gambling. By the time they came to Tombstone, they were as close as brothers, bound by a sense of loyalty and shared purpose. But Tombstone was no peaceful town. Trouble had been brewing for months with a group of men known as the Cowboys. This loose gang included Ike and Billy Clanton, Tom and Frank McLaury, and other ranchers and rustlers who operated along the border, often engaging in cattle theft, smuggling, and violence. These men wore red sashes and believed they controlled the region through intimidation. They hated the Earps and their efforts to enforce the law. Doc Holliday also had a personal feud with Ike Clanton, and he often mocked him publicly. As tensions rose, confrontations between the Earps and the Cowboys became more frequent. In July of 1881, Morgan and Virgil were ambushed while walking home. A month later, a stagecoach robbery ended in murder, and suspicions pointed toward cowboy connections. The situation was becoming a powder keg waiting to explode. On October 25, 1881, Ike Clanton came into Tombstone drunk and angry. He roamed from saloon to saloon, shouting that he would kill the Earps and Doc Holliday. Wyatt confronted him in one of the bars, telling him to calm down, but Ike would not back off. That night, Doc and Ike crossed paths, and Doc taunted him, daring him to draw his gun. Ike did not. The next morning, he was still in town, still armed, and still making threats. He met up with his brother Billy and the McLaury brothers, who had also come to town and were all carrying weapons in violation of the city ordinance. Virgil Earp decided it was time to act. He gathered Wyatt, Morgan, and Doc, and they set out to confront the Cowboys and disarm them before things got worse. Doc was deputized for the day, wearing a long coat and carrying a shotgun under it. At around 3 o'clock that afternoon, the Earps and Doc Holliday walked down Fremont Street toward a vacant lot behind the Corral, where the Cowboys had gathered. A nervous crowd watched from the sidewalks. The Cowboys stood waiting in a narrow lot next to Fly's photography studio. Virgil held a walking stick and wore a revolver. Morgan and Wyatt were both armed with pistols. Doc Holliday, coughing from tuberculosis, held a shotgun under his coat and carried a nickel-plated pistol. As the lawmen approached, Virgil called out that they were there to disarm them. Ike Clanton, who was now unarmed, claimed he wanted no trouble. But the McLaurys and Billy Clanton were tense and ready. Then it happened. A single shot cracked the silence and the lot exploded in gunfire. Doc Holliday was said to have fired first, unloading both barrels of his shotgun into Tom McLaury's chest. Wyatt Earp fired at Frank McLaury, hitting him in the stomach. Billy Clanton drew and fired back, hitting Morgan and Virgil. Doc dropped his shotgun, drew his revolver, and kept firing with deadly precision. Frank McLaury staggered into the street, still trying to fight. Billy Clanton, wounded multiple times, kept shooting from the ground. The whole fight lasted around 30 seconds. Nearly 30 rounds were fired. When it was over, 3 cowboys were dead. Tom and Frank McLaury and Billy Clanton lay in the dirt. Morgan and Virgil were wounded. Doc Holliday had a minor wound on his hip. Wyatt Earp stood untouched, his coat singed by powder but without a single scratch. Tombstone was on edge after the gunfight. 3 men lay dead, and the Earps and Doc Holliday found themselves both hailed as heroes and accused of murder. The funerals of Billy Clanton and the McLaury brothers were somber affairs, with the 3 caskets lined up in the same room and mourners filling the streets. The cowboys called them martyrs and swore vengeance. In a town where tension was always just beneath the surface, everything now hung by a thread. Wyatt, Virgil, Morgan, and Doc were arrested and charged with murder. A lengthy hearing followed. Witnesses came forward, but many were intimidated or outright threatened. Some changed their stories, others stayed silent. The cowboys were not just rustlers and gunmen. They were a power in Cochise County, but one man stood out. H.F. Sills, a railroad engineer recovering from an illness, had nothing to lose and no connections to either side. He calmly testified that he saw the Earps order the cowboys to disarm and that the cowboys refused and reached for their guns. His testimony supported the lawmen and contradicted the claims of cold-blooded execution. After reviewing the evidence, Judge Wells Spicer ruled that the Earps and Holliday had acted within the law. The charges were dropped. But the threat wasn't over. Just days later, Ike Clanton filed new complaints. Rumors of revenge ran thick in the air. On the night of December 28, 1881, Virgil Earp was ambushed while walking back to his hotel. A shotgun blast struck him in the back and shattered his left arm. He survived, but the wound crippled him permanently. The town knew who was responsible, but no arrests were made. Months passed. Then, on March 18, 1882, Morgan Earp was gunned down while playing billiards. A bullet crashed through the window, pierced his back, and tore through his body. Wyatt caught him as he collapsed. Morgan died in his brother's arms. That was the moment Wyatt Earp stopped believing in law and order. He formed a posse with men he could trust. Doc Holliday joined immediately. So did Warren Earp and a few loyal allies. They called it the Vendetta Ride. Their mission was personal and simple. No trials, no warrants, just retribution. The first man they tracked down was Frank Stillwell, believed to be involved in Morgan's murder. Wyatt found him near the Tucson train station and shot him dead. His bullet-riddled body was found beside the tracks. Next was Florentino Cruz, who had allegedly confessed to helping in the ambush. The posse cornered him near a woodpile and riddled him with bullets. Then came the confrontation with Curly Bill Brocious, one of the most feared cowboys in Arizona. They found him near Iron Springs. Wyatt rode straight into the gunfire, shotgun in hand, and fired point blank into Curly Bill's chest. The outlaw was thrown backward and killed instantly. The air exploded with bullets from the other cowboys in the camp, but Wyatt never flinched. He walked through the gunfire, calm and determined, and emptied his revolver. His coat was soaked by rain and sweat, but he came out without a scratch. Over the next few weeks, the Vendetta posse hunted down and eliminated other cowboys they believed responsible. The law turned a blind eye. Some feared them, others quietly supported them. Wyatt had crossed a line and there was no going back. By April, their bloody work was done. The Earps left Arizona as fugitives to some and folk heroes to others. Tombstone, once a booming silver town, would never recover its reputation. It faded into legend, defined not by its riches, but by the gunfire that echoed through its streets. Wyatt wandered the West for decades. He ran saloons, gambled, and tried his hand at gold mining in Alaska. He eventually settled in Los Angeles and even served as an advisor on Hollywood westerns in his old age. He died in 1929 at the age of 80, long enough to watch himself turned into a legend. Doc Holliday, who had fought through illness most of his adult life, grew weaker. He died in a Colorado hotel room in 1887. He had always expected to go out in a blaze of violence, not in bed. His last words, reportedly said with a faint laugh, were, "This is funny." Their names became legend, wrapped in myth and retold for generations. But the true legacy of the OK Corral lies not in who shot first, but in what it said about the frontier. Justice was personal, loyalty was everything, and survival depended on having someone who would stand with you when the bullets started flying. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more about the wildest tales of the Old West, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a shot.